Hi, my name is Aisha and I am back again with another video where I am truncating all of the books I read in 2 months into one video. So I didn't really read a lot of books in May and June, largely because I was doing quite a number of traveling. And I know you'd say, when you're traveling, should be you're supposed to have enough time to read. I think one of my neighbors is looking at me. But anyway, you would think when you're traveling, you're supposed to have enough time to read on like the bus or the train or the plane. But I don't like the process of traveling. I like the idea of being in a different place, but the process of going and carrying your load and moving about, I don't like it. And so I don't tend to do a lot of reading when I travel. I'm going to switch things up a little bit. Instead of focusing on dissecting all the things that I really enjoyed about the little books that I managed to finish reading, I am going to talk about the memories or experiences that these books reminded me of, which I think is an interesting thing because I had to sit down and think and think and think to know which memory I wanted to attach to which books. So in May, I finished 3 books. I started reading a lot more books, but I didn't finish them, so I didn't bother to add them to the list. But I finished 3 books, Sha. The first book I finished is Our Sister Killjoy by Ama Ata Aidoo. This is essentially a reprinting of this classic by the Ghanaian author Amata Aidoo. She has passed away now, but I met her at Aki Festival 2017, I believe. She was the headliner for that year. Our Sister the Killjoy follows an unnamed character that is called Sissy. So this character, we don't get an actual name for her. She just gets called Sissy throughout the book, which is similar to this book that I read in January called Just the Girl, where the character is just referred to as girl. We don't actually get her name. And it's interesting because Sissy is the name that's like you call a young woman in Ghana. Like it's the general term that you use to refer to a young woman in Ghana. She has been selected as one of the like African students that are going to have the opportunity to travel to Europe and experience culture and just all of those things that that kind of exporting the African child to Europe to witness the colonizer motherland kind of thing that they used to do in just post-colonial African countries. Yeah. So Sisi has basically been added to the entourage that is going to go to Europe. So the first place she goes to in Europe is Germany, which I found very interesting because like I'm experiencing being a black African woman in Germany. So this book was first published in 1977 and I think because of the era when she was publishing, because you have to imagine all of the classic African authors at this time were mostly men. So you had Chinua Achebe, I know Tayeb Saleh, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a bunch of like mostly men African writers writing at this point, and we are getting to see an experience of an African woman being the one to have gone on this type of journey, which you would typically see from the experience of an African man. We follow Sisi first recognizing the idea of being a black woman, experiencing Germany, and I got to like witness a bunch of like German phrases that I'm used to now that I can imagine that character, like Cece's character encountering those like terms for the first time. I can imagine how like stunned she was. And I'm not going to spend too much time on here because I said I wasn't going to like focus on this too much. But one thing I really enjoyed about this book is the experimental writing that Amartha Aidoo does with the book. What it reminded me of is that thing where in African folklore when you are being told stories, when the story is being told to a particular point and then a song starts, like a song. This is something that we're familiar with in like Yoruba storytelling. I am familiar with it anyway, but I think it's a general like African storytelling form. So for example, if they've told the story to a particular point and then a particular song is being sung and then there's a particular chorus that is being repeated and then the story would continue. That's kind of what she does here. So she infuses prose with poetry, and the poetry kind of signifies that singing part of telling African stories. So I had a love-hate relationship with the way that she has infused the storytelling style into the book because sometimes I really liked it because some of those stories have like the witty, like sarcastic commentary on colonialism in general, the concept of race. Of them touched on differences in like African countries, and they all had a single motive of sarcasm, which I really enjoyed. But some of them were not, like, they were annoying at some points, but they were very thought provoking at other times. So it was a mixed bag for me. One thing I also really enjoyed, and this will be the last thing I will say, is the idea of Amataido putting our character, like, so the female character gets to experience this idea of a white woman lusting after you. This is very significant because you would typically see this with male African characters. So it would typically be, or a post-colonial African man has traveled to Europe and gets to experience all these white women lusting after him. And you will see this in Tayeb Saleh's season of Migration to the North. But then we get to see it from the perspective of a black African woman. And then there's like touches of like queerness, which has been explored a little bit, because then you don't expect that. So I think in general, this was a very experimental book, and I would give it to Amataido. This is top level experimentation. So while I was reading this book, I wanted to superimpose my experience with Cece's experience when she first realized that, oh, she's black in this setting. And I quickly discovered that I can't remember exactly when the idea and the concept of race and racism settled in my head, because even though I first encountered my non-black person like in real life when I was 16, I had been exposed to the concept of racism way before that, from like reading and all of that. And I used to watch telenovela, so I knew that there were people that were not black. I already knew that. But the concept of racism itself, like being treated differently because of your skin color, I first encountered them while reading books. And so I cannot pinpoint the exact time that this concept became clear to me. And then this book also reminded me of my like first experience with racism, like my own personal first experience with racism. And I was a teenager. It's a very interesting story. And it also reminded me of my first time leaving my family home to go to uni to live with other people. So I first left the house after I graduated secondary school, and I was like 15. Yeah, I was 15. And my mom drove me down to school, and I had to live with like five other girls and experience people's different characters and belief systems. And so this book just reminded me of that memory. The next book that I read in May is a book called Breath, Eyes, Memory by Edwidge Danticat. This book was published in 1994, and it's the second or third novel by Edwidge Danticat that I'm reading. So the book is set in 80, and it follows a main character called Sophie Cacao. You get to witness the book from Sophie's perspective. So it's a first like person narration. And we follow Sophie from when she was younger up until her early 20s. And it's just a book that like explores the idea of growing into yourself when you will have complicated family trauma. So, for context, Sophie is a product of rape. Her mother was raped, and Sophie's mom had to move to the US to Oslo while Sophie was living with her auntie in Haiti. And when Sophie turned, I think when she turned 12, yeah, when she turned 12, she had to move from Port-au-Prince, which is the capital of Haiti, to New York to stay with her mom and live the American dream. So go to university, become a successful person, I guess. So because of the sexual violent history of like Sophie's existence, we see her mom's complicated relationship with sex and her body, and just navigating, having to reconcile the fact that Sophie is a product of the man that raped her, because Sophie doesn't look like her mom, and by extension, she had to look like the man that raped her. At some point, Sophie has her own child, and she has to reconcile all of that family trauma from a grandmother's generation to a mother's generation, our own generation, and wanting to heal and be better for a child. This book was a book club pick for the indulgent bibliophile for me, and I'm very happy that I read it because I generally enjoy Edwidge Danticat's writing, but I'd not gone back to reading any of her books after I read her first book, which was I can't even remember now. But I read her first book like 2019 or 2018. So I said the book reminded me of this Nigerian movie that I watched on YouTube recently called Ashabi's Child. It's on Balaji Ogumola's TV. I liked that particular movie because it was exploring sexual trauma, but also from the perspective of like intergenerational trauma, sort of, and by extension, mother daughter relationship. So we also have in the movie a three generational kind of thing. So grandmother, mother, and daughter. Also, the mother in that movie is grappling with the anger and just the pain that a child is a product of rape. So it's similar. It reminded me of that story in that respect. The next book that I read in May is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. This book was published in 2020, and I have known about this book since it was published, right? But I shied away from it because it's fantasy young adult, and that wasn't really my forte. But big mistake. I shouldn't have done that. Anyway, so at Ake Festival last year, the author came to promote her latest book called The Maid and the Crocodile. And I liked the reading. I liked the way that she like answered some of the questions on the panel. I liked her demeanor. I just really liked that. And then I came across one of her videos on TikTok where she was talking about the relationship between religion and the treatment of women. And I liked her mind. I liked the thoughts that she put out. So I decided I'm going to try this book. So I borrowed the audiobook on my library app, and then I eventually borrowed the ebook and I was reading them in tandem, which was a good experience. This book followed a young girl called Tarisai. Tarisai is bound by a magical wish that her mother has made. Tarisai's mother is basically absent. So Tarisai is always yearning after her mother. She comes to the house like once in a while. And this house is one magical castle in the middle of nowhere that nobody can see, but people inside can see the outside because the castle is under a magical spell as well. You have to realize that Tarisai only calls her mother the lady because she doesn't know the name of her mother. This is how aloof and mysterious the mother is. So the lady sends Tarisai to the city of Oluwon, which is the capital city of Aritsa Empire. So this is the world that this book is set in because, I said it's fantasy. So it's set in this world where there's this empire called Arisai and the capital of the empire is Oluwon. And basically they have this thing they do where young children comes from different parts of the empire to compete to join the Council of the Anointed, which are the closest confidant of the crown prince of the empire. So the lady wants Tarisai to join this council so that she can enact the curse that she has placed on the girl in future. That's basically the premise. I don't even think I said the blog very well, but that's the premise. Basically, we followed Tarisai's coming of age and our grappling with identity, the emotional starvation of not having a motherly love, and having to navigate committing a crime that you don't want to commit because of something your mother has done. So it's just an interesting coming of age story. So I really liked this book. I ended up really enjoying this book. And as I expected, the brilliance of Jordan Ifueko's mind shows up in the way that she builds the world, in the way that she writes the story, in the way that she infuses some current, like everyday isms and experiences that we see in our own like life, in actual real life, into the story. It's just so brilliant. Like she does this so brilliantly. Classism, sexism, even like I guess some form of racism, like the idea of excluding some people because of certain things, because of like their race or the part of the world that they come from. So I guess some form of racism then. But an interesting thing that I really love about this book is the fact that she shows a lot of POC solidarity in the book. So all of the characters draw on from different cultures of the world. So Yoruba, Indian, I think some Igbo as well. Just like different POC world. There's also a lot of Pan-Africanism that I could sense in the way that she builds the characters. I love the way that she blends the world together. And her writing is just so beautiful. I was reminded of Hunger Games when I was reading Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. And it reminds me of Hunger Game because of the way that you kind of need to bring young adults together to participate in a game. And even though the people that were not selected for were the anointed ones of the Crown Prince in Raybearer, even though they don't have to be killed like the way participants die in the Hunger Games, but many of them ended up killing themselves because it's their lifelong dream to be part of the anointed ones, like the council of the anointed ones. And some of them don't even have a choice of where to go back to if they don't make the council. So some of them, they are like family or society has told them that, see, if you don't make it, don't come back. So some of them end up like actually killing themselves. So it made me wonder like how that coincides like with our own life currently. So some people have this ambition or they want to be part of a group of people, like an elite group of people, and if they don't make it, they don't feel a sense of belonging in the world. Like there's nothing featuring them to remain in the world. But yeah, this book really reminded me of that and just that concept when I was reading it. So we have come to the essays that I read in May. I didn't even mention earlier that I was going to talk about the essays, but we all know that I was going to talk about the essays. Anyway, so the first essay I read in May is Why I Don't Cook for Men I Love by Amina Lawal. I'm not going to go into why I love this essay because I don't want this video to be too long, but yeah, I love this essay. The next essay I read is Give Sorrow Words by Zara. I quickly realized that this author has become a staple for me to read her article at least once a month, pretty much the way Wada Abbas is. The next essay I read is If You Really Want to Get to Know a Person by Jamie L. Coates. So if you watch my couple of videos ago, I talked about reading some articles about how traveling with your friends or loved ones can affect your relationship with them. This was one of the articles that I read for that. Another article that I read in May is Let's Be Honest, You Don't Really Know Your Partner or Friends Until You Travel with Them by Lucas Neal. I also read How to Write a Git Commit Message by Cbeams. So this was actually an article that my tech lead sent to me. There was one commit that I created that I did not check the proper message and he didn't want to scold me. So he sent me the link as a way of scolding me. But I ended up enjoying it because I learned a lot from the article. The next article I read is I Love You, but I will probably not text back by Amina Lawal. I also kind of like this author. I subscribe to her. The next one I read is How to Get Smart Again by Postcards by L. I mean, the title is self-explanatory. So, next article I read is Maybe You're Not Broken, Maybe You're Just Tired by With Love Jita. I'm always tired, so. Next article I read is Love as Resistance. Can We Center Compassion in Our Activism by Warda Abbas. My fav. Then Even in the Mess, Under the Rubble, and The Guest's House of Grief by Warda Abbas. Then I read 30 Truths by Lola. This is an interesting article, which I think I'm going to do for my next year's birthday, inshallah. So it's basically the author writing 30 things that are true about her for her 30th birthday, which I think is really cool. Next one I read is Chapter 49 by Amin, the Crazy Book Lady. This is a like newsletter, which Amin writes I think quarterly or like a few times a month. I can't remember, but I shall always read it. Sha. Next one I read is How Do I Trust Myself by Etha Avrileski. So I read one article by this author like the month before, so I think April, and I just started reading articles by her. She's so cool. Heck. Then the next article I read is Watch Yourself Like a Stranger by Zara. Another brilliant article from this author. She always manages to infuse like Islam with psychology, which I vibe with. Next article I read is What Would a Woman Do to an Unconscious Man If She Thought No One Would Find Out by Anna Wharton. Let me not say anything. But Sha, if you don't read any article in this video, any of the articles I mentioned, read this one. This one you should read. The next one I read is The Story of a Novelist's Wife, the Mukoma Ngugi Nyambura Controversy and Lessons for African Literature by Ani Edoro. So I read this essay when Ngugi Wa Thiong'o died in May. And I read it because I wanted to see if people had written any article about the accusation that Mukoma, his son, leveled against him a couple, I think, months ago. I'm not sure if it was this month or last year. But the man said that his father used to beat his mother before she died. I always say that we genuinely, as a society, we don't really deep the implication of violence against women and children. We don't really deep it and we don't really think it's that serious because of the way we gloss over and we don't fully shame the people that do it. We just consider it's one of those things, to be honest. But anyway, let's just move on. The last article I read in May is The City of Love by Nawal Sari. So I first came across this writer. I came across her video on YouTube and I just liked her vibe. She likes books and I just liked her vibe. So I wanted to see who she was on the internet. So I went and checked like Substack. Then I went and checked her Instagram and I saw that she's a hijabi influencer. And I think I am really loving it when hijabi influencers showcase their geeky side. I wish Shad Batal would do something like this, like open a Substack, sister, and let's see what's in your mind. Let's see what you're thinking about. Let's see your thought process. Because I know for a fact that Shad is a smart lady, like mashallah. Anyway, those are the essays that I read in May, as well as the books that I read in May. In June, I also finished 3 books. I definitely started reading more than that. First of all, I wasn't tracking my reading and I just wasn't finishing a lot of books. But we're going to go. So the first one that I completed is A Midlife Gamble by Cary J Hansson. So if you've watched my January wrap up as well as my February wrap up, was it February or March? I can't remember. But yeah, if you shall watch my wrap up from earlier this year, you would know that I've read 2 books already by this author. This book is a third book in a trilogy by Cary J Hansson. It's the Midlife series. So basically, the book follows 3 women who have been friends for a long time since they were in their 20s and they're in their 50s now. And we're just following them, their lives together, them navigating friendships and like children and all these complex realities of life and just being in your like midlife, like that early 50s. So in the final part of this series, we are basically following one of the friends, Ellen, finally sorting out a drama with another one of the friends, Carol. So throughout the first 2 parts of the book, you can sense the tension between these 2 women. Like, it's just so high school. Like, you people should sit down and talk about things, but they refuse to do it. So their third friend's name is Kay. So she was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness and they decided to take a trip to Vegas to celebrate. Like, not to celebrate. Not to celebrate, to do something for their friend, like to do something cool for their friend. During this trip, we just watched them ironing out some of their life dramas and coming to individual realizations by themselves and just like living life and having fun in their 50s. So this book reminded me of all of the female friendship movies that I've seen. So the idea of a group of women taking a trip to rekindle their friendship or just to connect. All of the types of movies that I've seen that have centered female friendships, taking a trip, this book reminded me of that. And one thing that I always realize is that their friendship is usually stronger when they've cleared up all the drama than at the beginning of the movie when they are still lying to themselves and walking on eggshells. And lastly, while I was reading this book, I really understood in my bones, like really, really, really deep it in my bones that no woman on earth can survive without significant female friendships. Like, you need female friendships to survive in this world as a woman. You just need it. If anybody is lying to you that you don't, they want to isolate you and they are lying to you. Finally, the idea that all meaningful relationships have to come with regular rupture and repair. So for a relationship to be meaningful, there has to be significant rupture that is always followed with significant repair, because you can't have a fulfilling relationship without rupturing it at some point and then repairing it in a way that all parties feel heard and loved and appreciated. The second book that I read in June is The Maid and the Crocodile by Zhan Ifueko. So, I said earlier that I really enjoyed Raybearer and I ended up reading our latest book. So, The Maid and the Crocodile is more like a spin off of Raybearer. The story is set in the same world of Oluwan City in the Arita Empire, but this time around we're following a smaller character that would typically be neglected in a like big setting like Oluwan City. She's called Small Shade. So Small Shade is an orphan that has outgrown the orphanage. So when you get to a certain age, they send you out of the orphanage, like send you out of the system because you are now an adult. You can go and fend for yourself. So Small Shade has been sent out of the orphanage because she has graduated from the orphanage and she needs a job, preferably a job where she can work as a maid. And because Small Shade has a limp, so she uses a cane and she also has vitiligo, she knows that a lot of people try to avoid hiring like maids like that because they consider her to be cursed because of her limp and the fact that she has vitiligo. So Small Shade accidentally bumps into a god called the Crocodile. And this god is rumored to devour pretty girls. And Small Shade is thinking, I'm not a fine girl now, so this god is not going to have any issue with devouring me. So because she did not want the crocodile to eat her, she told the crocodile that she's a curse eater. So curse eaters are basically like people that eat curses. So basically, they like go into people's house and they clear up all of the bad energy. That's why they are called curse eaters. So when Small Shade offers her curse eating capabilities to the crocodile, somehow our destiny becomes intertwined with the crocodile's destiny. So they became intertwined, and this is the beginning of the story. We shall basically follow Small Shade trying to make something of herself in the big one city. And very similar to Raybearer, Jordan Ifueko is such a brilliant woman. She also manages to bring all of the isms that we experience in our own life. She manages to bring it into the world. So ableism, classism, the ill treatment of essential workers because we don't consider the work that they do essential, which is crazy because we call them essential workers, but we look down on the work that they do. So people that work as maids, for example, or cleaners. Remember there was one thread that I saw one time where this woman was saying, oh, how can they be paying? How can somebody be fighting to increase the pay of garbage collectors? Oh, like, oh, they don't need a degree to do that job, blah, blah, blah. And I'm here thinking, garbage collectors, if garbage collectors go on strike, do you know how the city stinks? Remember there was one time in Berlin, the garbage collectors went on strike and I think 2 days, the city was stinking. Berlin is always stinking before. Now, garbage collectors went on strike. You needed to see how smelly the city was. So yeah, this kind of concept she also touched on in the story. I wrote in my notes that this book reminded me of the K-drama The Heirs, starring Park Shin-hye and Imino. This K-drama I watched in my teens. I can't remember, but I watched it in my teens and I rewatched it like a couple years ago too. But basically, even though Park Shin-hye's character she's not the actual maid and she's not the one with disability. Her mom is the maid and she's the one with disability. So her mom is deaf in the drama. So yeah, Park Shin-hye helps her mom with her chores, and our character is also fluent in sign language. So we do see some ableism in the drama, and the drama also touches on a lot of injustices, classism, some form of ableism, I remember, and particularly the injustices that show up in a world where the elephants fight and tussle and just move around without any care in the world for the smaller ants that are just walking on the grass. That's the repeating motive in The Maid and the Crocodile. So often Shade would mention how she's this small ant in a world where there are all these like elephants moving around without a care about how their actions or their inactions affect this smaller, insignificant people. So that also shows up in the K-drama. And so the book reminded me of that K-drama and all the memories that I had. And the fact that Park Shin-hye has grown as an actress from that character that she played, that she was so stiff. The last book that I read in June is Isaac's Song by Daniel Black. So this book is a follow-up for the other book that I read earlier this year called Don't Cry for Me. So Isaac's song is basically following Isaac the son and him grappling with his emotions about his father, because the father is now dead, right? So he's grappling with his emotions as his father and his own experiences as a queer black man. And he's doing this with like a therapist. So we do see a therapist's perspective. I thought that the book reminded me of Davy and her mother in the series Never Have I Ever, the Netflix series. So even though Devi is not a queer character, like Isaac is a queer character, but she also had a complicated relationship with her mother. That her father is the one that is always trying to diffuse. And this is similar to Isaac in that it was closer to his mom, and his relationship with his father is always so volatile that the mom is always trying to manage the tension. When Davy's dad also passed away, their relationship got worse. So Davy and her mother's relationship also got worse. And this is similar to what happens to Isaac and his father. Because when the mom died, the relationship just got worse. The healing journey that Davy and her mom goes through is similar to the healing journey that Isaac embarked on with his memory of his father. Because, I mean, the father is dead now. So, and lastly, while I was reading this book, it in a way reminded me of my own relationship with my mom. So, me reflecting on that versus what my relationship with my mom is now and all of the ways that I understand that better is pretty much similar to Isaac and his father's relationship in this book in that sense. And I think many of us can relate to that, understanding your parents better as an adult. I'm going to move on now to the essays that I read in June. In June, like in May, I read quite a bunch of essays as well. So the first essay that I remember reading in June is How to Get Your Life Back Together by Postcards by Elle. So this is a series which this author is doing, and the essay that I read by the same author in May is actually the first essay in the series. So I just like went back to the beginning. The next essay that I read is Soft Girl, The Radical Trend Millennial Love by Evie Mui, I think. So this essay basically follows how the soft girl idea came from Nigerian women and how it has been hijacked by Americans. The next essay that I read is How Revolutionary Can a Wife Beater Be by Ayo. This is a follow-up random article that I found on Substack that reminded me of the other essay that I read in May. So yeah, it follows the same premise with Ngugi wa Thiong'o having beat his wife when he was alive. Next essay I read is Mentally Preparing So I Don't Combust by Hamida. So Hamida decided to open a Substack in June, and of course I have to support my girl. So I read the article that she wrote. This is just like a really cute article that she wrote. Next essay that I read is To Have or To Be by Zara. Same thing. I really enjoyed this author's mind, and I like the way that she talks about the mind and emotions and habits. It's very me coded right now. So next essay that I read is Honoring the Legacy of Dr. Refaat Alareer, My Professor and Big Brother by Ala from Gaza. So I found this Gazan author on Substack and I followed her. I remember I read Refaat Alareer's anthology that he edited. Forgotten the name, but I read the book and I wrote a review for it. I can't remember the name now, but may Allah expand his grave and put immense light in it and liberate the people of Gaza from their oppressor. I mean, the next essay that I read is 6 Harsh Truths That Will Make You a Better Person by Jason Pagan. I actually enjoyed this essay, but I felt like it just had a little bit of aspire to perspire, which I don't really like, but the essay still, it made points, it made sense. Next essay I read is Amoke and Jean Tirole by Feyi Fawemi. This is a Substack account that I came across. It focuses on like economics, which is not really my forte. I didn't enjoy economics in school, but I like the idea of superimposing things that we do like in our own immediate environment with theories that scholars or academics have come up with. So this is kind of what the article does. which I really enjoyed reading about. The next essay that I read is I have studied over 200 kids. The ones with high emotional intelligence have parents who do 7 things early on by Rauda. I saw this essay on TikTok and I took a screenshot and I eventually read it in June. So the last essay that I read is Self-Sabotage Masquerades as Protection, Don't Fall For It by Zara. I think this is the first month this year that I didn't read anything by Wada Bass in a month, which is crazy. I need to fix up. Because I've not read anything by her this July too. She hasn't been posting, but I'm going to go and read her backlog, the ones I've missed. But yes, these are all of the books and essays that I read in May and June. I realized that I did not give star ratings to the books that I read, but I'm going to ensure that I put their star ratings while I edit the videos. But it's just because I've not thought about my star ratings for any of these books. But anyway, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the books that I've read, and I hope I'll be back with more interesting books by the end of July. Ciao.